Hey, this is Diener of the Swellers and Braided Veins, and you are listening to the Voice and Verse podcast.
Hello there, and welcome to episode 11 of the Voice and Verse podcast. I'm your host, Evan Lucy, taking you through the stories behind your favorite songs. This week, I'm joined by Jonathan Diener, drummer for the Swellers and Braided Veins. The Swellers formed back in 2002 in Flint, Michigan, when Jonathan and his brother Nick decided to start playing punk rock. They recruited some friends and eventually signed with Fueled by Ramen, for whom they released two albums, 2009's Ups and Downsizing and 2011's Good For Me. The band's knack for punk rock earned them a sizable cult following, as well as opening spots on tours with the likes of Paramore, Bayside, Anti-Flag, and the Vans Warped Tour. Their most recent album, last year's The Light Under Closed Doors, was released on No Sleep Records, and the band recently put out a compilation of B-sides and early demos, which you can find at theswellers.bandcamp.com. I caught up with Jono to talk about the differences in the writing process between the Swellers and Braided Veins, how real life inspires his lyrics, and why, when your Meatloaf influence pops up, it's best not to repress it. So, without further ado, I bring you my conversation with Jono from the Swellers.
Yeah, the first thing I always bring up is there's a few different ways of songwriting, and I guess there's the permanent, or I'm trying to find a better way to word it. Sometimes someone will write a song, and that's it. Like, this is how it goes. Boom, it's done. Then when there's collaborative songwriting, whether it's, someone else in the band or a producer, or a lot of people do the co-writing with other people, people need to send their ideas through a filter. And, a lot of people will originally think oh, that's cheating or that's whatever. But the reality of it is, some people actually have to work with someone else to make their, to have their thing actualized, their idea or whatever it may be. So, at least with Sweller stuff, one really cool thing is, since Nick and I are brothers, we think weirdly eye to eye on almost, as far as musically, almost everything. So originally it was him doing 100% of all the songwriting, because I was like a 14-year-old drummer, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And so he'd write everything from music to lyrics, and then I'd just do whatever drum parts I felt necessary. And then over time, I started chiming in more and more. And our very first EP, well, not our first EP, but our first legit EP came out in 2005, and that was the first time where I started adding in little things when it came to lyrics, just because I actually had something to talk about for once. Which is, it's a lot different than when you're a little kid and you're just man, today was really hard. Oh, why? Dude, I tried recording a thing on VHS and it didn't work. Oh man, life's hard. You don't have your actual life experience yet.
Yeah.
So, when I finally started getting that, it started helping a little bit. But that's one cool thing where, the more Nick let me collaborate with him, the more we realized what made sense for the Swellers and what didn't. So there's, that kind of is where the B-Sides record comes from, where there's a bunch of random stuff just floating around. That's whether it's an unfinished idea or this complete origins of a song that, I don't know, we were kind of just I don't want that to see the light of day. And then you hear the final product, but we only worked with an actual producer once ever, which is Bill Stevenson from Descendants at the Blasting Room. And that was the only time we ever had someone just put his hands in our songs and not necessarily rip them apart, but reorganize them and be this needs one more part, this needs a chorus, this needs that. So I guess a good place to start would be that The Best I Ever Had, which is probably our biggest song. And I was doing air quotes, but I realized that no one could hear my hands do that. But that's definitely a good start. Where that's a total mix.
The demo is a little different than what ended up on the record. Obviously, a lot of the stuff is still the same. I think the double time comes in a little earlier, but you can kind of hear. At what point in the process was that demo recorded? Was that just like very early on?
Yeah, Nick had one of his weird, brilliant guy moments where he just recorded all this stuff on his own and was like, "Dude, we have to jam this." And his actual original idea was he wanted a Meatloaf song structure, and that's like the first music he really got into growing up. Just the super dramatic, over the top songwriting that's like really like melancholy and just cool and different. Like it always had something extra and weird to it instead of just the same pop structure. But there's a way to write music where you don't have to follow a pop structure, and you can have you could invoke the same emotions that, the standard, like, this certain chord would make you feel this certain way, and vice versa. So what Nick wanted to do was write this really weird song where it was a storytelling song, and he's like, I don't care musically what it does, as long as it goes to the certain thing. So obviously, like, our band was a very, fast-paced, oriented band, so we had the punk rock beat in it, but the chorus didn't exist. All it would lead up to this part, and it's just this like sad sounding just vocal and guitar thing, and then it would go back into the verse again. And it always, to me, being like verse, chorus, bridge, end. That is like how like my brain has functioned after being in our band for so long. It's like the Weezer structure, and we were just like, this is cool, but whatever. And we played it for Bill, like when we were doing pre-production with him, and he just said, this is probably your best song and you don't have a chorus for it. Like, what the hell are you doing? And I was just sitting there, I'm like, shit, you're right.
Well, especially since you were on Fueled by Ramen at the time, and I don't think you can be on that label without writing good choruses. Unless you're Ghost Town.
Oh boy.
I don't think anybody from Ghost Town's going to listen to this podcast, so I think we're okay making fun of Ghost Town.
Yeah. I don't know what the hell is going on with that thing, but as far as us, like, we thrive on melodies and choruses and the hooks. Like, that's like what makes our band our band. And, whether it's through the filter of like a punk rock band or a pop band or whatever, we just like the things that make us feel good. So we were kind of just sitting there and trying to like butt our heads together. And finally we were like, well, what if that weird quiet guitar part was the beginning of the chorus? And we're kind of just like sitting around like doing it, and then I just did I did like the chorus drum beat to it, and I tried humming what I wanted it to be. And the cool thing about working with your brother, Nick understands my super bad drum lingo. So I was like, and he was like, oh, like this? And everyone else was just looking at each other like, how did you guys even recognize what you were talking about?
You got a secret language.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the cool thing too, is, like once in a while you'll find someone who has that, regardless of actually being related, like musicians that have been doing stuff forever, or like just songwriters in general, they have that weird way of meshing. So, we finally got that chorus out of it, and we didn't want it to just be a punk song, so we took out like the first bass verse, but then the second one we threw it in there because it was like, paying homage to the whole like we grew up with fast punk rock. So it's weird that one of our biggest songs has the fast punk rock beat in it, and that kind of worked out in a weird way and like showed a lot of people that that exists. Which sometimes I wonder if I regret adding that beat in there, if we could just make it a super pop song, but. That's kind of the story of our careers. We're like, we're gonna do it how we think. No, sorry, not how we think. How we know we want it, and we don't really care about the other side of it.
Right.
So there's that kind of thing. And then my other band, Braided Veins, it's the exact opposite of everything Swellers. So I pretty much handpicked 4 other dudes who I loved just being from other bands. like only in the Flint area, which is the cool thing. So they're all local guys, and each one of them, like one guy was in an alt country band called Empty Orchestra. One was in a band called Kid Brother Collective, which is like the big pinnacle like emo rock band from Michigan.
Okay.
And we all got in a room and we're like, let's write super abrasive stuff, really short, intense songs, and it has to be nothing like we've done before. We're like, okay. And it just started spawning out of nowhere. But I started noticing that two of the guys I had that weird connection with, like I did with Nick, where you could just look at each other and know where to stop or what note to hit next and all that kind of stuff. But the funny thing is, like, it's a good example would be with drumming. It's actually harder to play a straight beat and not do a fill than do a really cool fill, because your brain wants you to elaborate and do something different, you know? So, like, with Swellers stuff, you know, to an extent, a lot of it was pretty straightforward, whereas this band, Braided Veins, is just super complicated and weird, and everybody's pretty much just showing off the whole time in their own weird way, you know?
Yeah.
But it's really cool because the second vocals come over it, it makes it a song. When it's on its own, it just sounds like bizarre chaos, you know?
Hey, you made it on the radio, so that's not that weird.
Yeah, that was the funniest thing. Like, we're playing a thing called Dirt Fest in August, and it's a huge festival in Michigan. Swellers did it years ago when it was just like punk and death metal, like a bunch of random bands, and now it's like a very big like radio rock fest. So it's like Paramore 5000, Head P, you know, bands like that, which, you know, our band does not fit in because we were made for like basements and just kind of like, you know, weird, more hardcore punk settings. And yeah, the Detroit rock radio station did like a Dirt Fest takeover and played like one of our fastest songs on there with this like really, we have these really creepy quotes on the record, and the whole vibe of that is you know, it's just like weird propaganda and stuff like that. So that kind of ties into songwriting too, where, you know, we wrote this really bizarre stuff, but somehow I was still able to get on the radio in a weird roundabout way, because it's not necessarily the song itself, but it's like, you know, what it's associated with, I guess. Sure.
I want to go back. You talked about Nick kind of falling in love with Meatloaf. I think the first time I met you was, gosh, it must have been like 2009 at this point, so long ago.
It was on the 4 Year Strong tour, wasn't it?
On the 4 Year Strong tour, the Gig Life tour, or whatever it was.
Yeah.
At Pops in Sauget, Illinois, which is just a great place. It's strip club, and then Pops, and then a gas station where you can also bet on the ponies. Just a great place. And I was doing your AP recommends 2-pager, and you talked about how, you know, like Mill and Colin was like a band that got you into punk rock, and you had like the Punkorama comps that I think you got from your cousin or somebody.
Yeah.
So why did you guys decide to kind of suppress that Meatloaf thing until later on and just kind of play skate punk?
A really big part of it is, I guess, just being comfortable with yourself. And a lot of people don't realize that's a really hard thing for a band to do, especially when you have, you know, whether it's like a label or a fan base or all these kind of people, you know, it's almost like investors in a way. And you always want to, whether you acknowledge it or not, you always want to like appease these people. So when we were growing up, you know, we listened to like, you know, everything from like Meatloaf to like MC Hammer to, you know, a good example, like my favorite part about being young is one birthday, I think Nick and I got, it was like a Sheryl Crow CD, Rob Zombie, Jewel, Hanson, and it was just like the most like confusing, and then like Goldfinger, Blink-182, you know, like all of this was at once. And when you're younger, you don't have that weird, there's no such thing as a guilty pleasure. You just genuinely like what you hear, you know? And over time, you know, you develop that, like in our case, I guess, we had the whole like punk rock guilt situation where, you know, you have to like this certain thing, and like you can't like this, and you feel a certain way about that, and yada yada yada. So to an extent, you suppress a lot of that, like you were saying, you know. And then when we got old enough and we started listening to more stuff, we realized we don't want to just be, you know, in this category. we want to be our own weird thing. And I guess that's when we started experimenting with stuff like that for that Good For Me record, which is the weirdest thing for us because in my mind, if that record was like, and I'm not blaming a record label, a manager, us, anything, if everything went perfectly with that record and it was pushed and all that kind of stuff, it could have been a huge deal, you know,
Yeah.
because all the songs, it was like our big rock record. And the funny thing is, by doing more, not necessarily mainstream stuff, I guess, but like we pretty much wrote like There's Nothing Left to Lose Foo Fighters record,
Yeah.
where it's like the more chill, like with some other weird songs kind of thing. We wrote a record like that, and because we're the band we were on, the label we were on, it made all these people turn their heads and freak out. And it was either like, I don't get it, and it's a grower, which in reality, how is it a grower if that's the most like accessible record we've ever written, you know?
Yeah.
Like that's why it's so weird, because regardless of what you write, it's how you're presenting it that changes everything for people. So with a record like that, you know, we finally started taking these risks, and it was so half and half, and all the other like political stuff going on with the band, it really affects the way you write music. Because, you know, good example, fast punk rock. I graduated from high school in 2006. A week later, I went on my first like month and a half long tour around the U.S. And, you know, we're playing these like, you know, super fast punk rock songs. We had a 7-song set, going crazy. And we started doing that for a few years, and like the records were changing a little bit over time, but, you know, still like fast oriented. But when you're playing fast paced, like really intense music, and people are just kind of standing there and nodding, you don't really want to write that music anymore because you're not getting the reaction you want out of it.
Sure.
And a lot of people don't realize that, you know, regardless of the music you're writing, like the live application of it is how you actually start basing everything. So for, you know, comedians do jokes to get laughs. Hardcore bands do jokes to get, or not, sorry, that's a Freudian slip, I guess. Hardcore bands, you know, they do music to get, like, you know, people moshing or whatever. And then, like, punk bands, they want, like, circle pits, and they want, you know, just movement in general, I guess. And, you know, we never really got that. Like, once in a while we would, but our fan base is its own, you know, bizarre mix of people to where you kind of just stand around, you know? And so we were like, well, why would we write this music for that reaction? So we're like, let's just write, you know, music that we think is good, and that's it. You know, we're not trying to impress anyone. We're not trying to get a crowd reaction. All we want to do is just play something where we can feel confident in it, and it'll be okay if no one moves around, because who cares, you know?
Yeah.
So that's where that Good For Me record came in, where there's not really fast songs on it. And then because of the reaction of that record and all the stuff that went down politically with it, like, you know, we ended up leaving the record label and eventually, like, getting rid of our manager, and that was a big deal, too. More so than the label, because a lot of people started treating us totally different when it's us taking care of ourselves, you know? And we didn't have that random, like, political pull and things, so we started not getting all the opportunities we wanted to get. So all this weird stuff started happening, and that in turn makes you an angry person.
Mm-hmm.
An angry mentality reflects in your music. So you start listening to, you know, Good For Me, where we're like, you know what, things are pretty good, and this is kind of cool, whatever. And then the EP after that, it's like, fuck the world. Like, seriously.
Yeah. Like,
what the hell's going on? Like, and I went through a breakup right before that, and, like, my life was literally a 180 than it was. Because I was like, okay, I have to look at everything completely differently. Like, the girl I was with forever, like, you know, whether or not it was a good thing or not, that was totally different. Plus this record label situation. So now I'm completely independent as a person, not just a band. And that whole EP is split. Like, you can't tell if I'm talking about a person or a label. That's the funny thing. If you really look at the lyrics, and I, weirdly enough, wrote most of them, but you can't tell if we're talking about our band or us as individuals and about, like, everyday things or just being in a band, because they both start intertwining at some point. And then after that, we did our newest record, and that's kind of a culmination of everything, where it's like, you know, we're pissed off, but we're okay with it because we know how things are. And it's almost like not a defeatist attitude, but it's like, it is what it is, you know?
Well, you hear that on a song like Becoming Self-Aware, I think, from the new record.
Yeah, that's pretty much the pinnacle song for that whole feeling, I guess. Because I started writing that song years ago, and I had like bits and pieces of it, and then when we got back from that 2-month tour, when like the label situation happened and the relationship thing happened for me and all this kind of stuff, I was couch surfing for like a week just at my friends' houses, and pretty much trying to avoid my apartment so I didn't have to like go back there between tours and like, you know, have it be a whole awkward thing. And I just went to a park in Flint by myself with a guitar, which is, you know, something I've never done before, and I'm just out of my element. And I just started writing for a few hours, and that's where the song started like taking shape. And then eventually the whole idea is like, you don't really feel comfortable anywhere you go, and people that you thought were on your side, it's not that it's a bad thing and they're bad people, but it's like you build the perception of someone, and when that starts changing, you see how it really is. You know, you kind of go back to this weird, like, oh shit, I'm alone again, and you like, you know, hide in the corner in your mind, and you don't want to really talk to anybody. But after a while, it's kind of like you have to come to terms with certain things, and you have to get over it. And, you know, that song and the new record and all that kind of stuff, it all kind of, you know, molds together with that mentality where it's like, I get it now, and it that doesn't mean it's a good thing or not. I understand, like, it's a very, like, realist song, I guess. That's a good way of putting it.
Mm-hmm. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of the songs or kind of the vibe for the new record started out as a side project that you and Nick were doing, right?
Yeah. So we were trying to just like clear our heads and not deal with a lot of stuff. And there's a band called High Low that we wanted to start, and we recorded 4 demos, and it was Should, Got Social, and the song High Low. And then we actually did a Floor cover, like from the band Floor,
mm-hmm.
and that ended up just coming out. But we recorded it in the same session, and it's just really bizarre because that was one of those things where that was the first time I ever tried doing a non-Swellers project, because I've always done Swellers since I was 14, you know, and like we were just trying to think differently. And the idea for that, or that side project, was we write exactly what we feel exactly at that moment, and the second we're like, yeah, that could be a song, it's done. You don't touch it.
Yeah.
You just let it go. And that's one thing that a lot of people don't ever do, because everyone wants to like George Lucas the situation and go in and keep tweaking things and changing it. And pretty much, you know, you could really mess up whether it's a song or, you know, you look at the new Star Wars movies.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's a lot of things like that where you start tweaking everything, and it just, like, you lose your original vision of it. So those 3 songs, the idea was, let's write it and stop when we're good. We're not going to overthink a single thing, and that's what we did. And then one day we were like, what? Like, instead of like a baritone guitar, which is what Nick was using, like just the super deep, heavy guitar, like bass tuning.
That's like what Korn uses, like, right? They use like baritone guitars, or
yeah,
like Slipknot or something like that.
Like the band Torch uses them, like Baroness. Like there's like a bunch of like heavy bands that like, you know, we're into. Yeah, like, you know, metal bands stuff, we use that too. And the cool idea is we're doing like just like sludgy pop kind of stuff, which, you know, we think is really different and unique. And so we transposed it to just normal guitar and like slightly more upbeat drum beats. And we're like, dude, this could just be like a cool garage rock Swellers song. And then all of them started turning into that. So then the whole mentality with the new record was, no one's going to produce this record other than us, because the last one happened like, you know, it just felt different than everything else we've done. So we're like, well, let's make this, like, you know, everyone's always like, this record's the most mature thing we've done, and blah, blah, blah. We always looked at it as, you know, it's immature, because we're not doing anything crazy. We're not really digging deep. We're doing exactly what we feel. And to me, that's more real than like someone trying to act like they're older and trying to do that. It's like, you know, I don't know how to word it, but I guess that's a good way of putting it.
What do you think you talked about Good For Me, you know, you didn't want somebody to produce it again, but did you feel maybe it was because going back, you made Ups and Downsizing on your own dime, and then Fueled by Ramen came in and were like, we want to sign you and put this record out, right? That's the way it worked?
Yeah.
So you had somebody else paying for it, who probably had some opinions about how they wanted it to sound, and you had your first real producer. So did you feel kind of some of the things that you wanted to do were kind of not compromised in a way, but it didn't turn out exactly the way you wanted because of external factors?
So this is a really interesting one. There's so many different situations where, let's say, if we were a pop band, our label would just directly chime in and be like, dudes, you just should do this, and, that's how it's going to go, whatever. And because we're like this punk band that's like established ourselves, and we have our sound, and we have all this stuff, and, I like to think that we're pretty decent at like structuring and songwriting already. We didn't directly hear anything, but it was all these, like, I guess if you want to use like a Game of Thrones reference, it's like, like all the whispers around us where, we had like casual conversations with people, and whether or not they're trying to like sway us a certain way or whatever, in our heads we were like, we have a big budget and our first record on this label did well, so why not write like a cool rock record, And we weren't thinking like we're going to sell out. We weren't going to we didn't think they were trying to make us to. There's just these weird, I guess there's overall vibes in it. So those thoughts going into it where we were kind of just like, we were angry about the reaction of all these new like pop punk bands who were writing songs about like breaking up with a girlfriend while we're writing a song about one of our friends dying and thinking about a life that's like really aggressive, and not a single person gives a shit or moves around,
Yeah.
So we were like, well, we don't need to do stuff like that for this one. Like, let's just chill out for a little bit. Life's pretty good, and let's reflect that on the record. So, we went for like the whole Foo Fighters kind of vibe, and it's just bizarre how it turned out. So that mixed with a producer who just finished Rise Against's newest record, and he was in his, like, I don't know if like the label was talking to him or what, but they were very much like, we can make you a big rock band, so this is the normal song structure, but use what you already have. So instead of being something like, hey, change this part, or I wrote this part for you, like, none of that happened. But it was just like, I'm getting bored with this, do something cooler,
Yeah.
And that was the cool thing. Like, we actually had to push ourselves to do something cooler. But then in retrospect, you look at that record, to me, that's like the one weird record that we're always going to think about, because I don't even think we took a risk on it. We just did what we felt was right. And a lot of people turned on us, I think. And, a lot of people will be like, oh yeah, Ups and Downsizing, that's my favorite record. But then I think of bands that I got into, and it's always the record I first listened to is the one that I really liked. So like, like Saves the Day, for example, I really got into them during Stay What You Are.
Me too.
And to me, that's like their pinnacle. So then, I know a lot of people are thinking, for us, it's that record. But then in my head, I'm like, just the way it was recorded sounds weird and blah, blah, blah. And then Good For Me is like, to me, like the perfect recording sound, and like quality-wise and everything, it's rad. But if we weren't the Swellers going into that, it would be a totally different situation,
Yeah.
So that's the weird thing that like a lot of, I guess, music listeners don't realize, that when bands are changing and bands, have these different ways of going about songwriting, it's not that someone's forcing them to do it, and it's literally just adapting and evolving and trying to survive,
Yeah.
So some people purposely do that, and you could tell when they're forcing it, and other bands just naturally do it because, like, I don't listen to, like, fast punk rock anymore, really. Like, I grew up on it because that's all I listened to, but I never gave anything else a shot. So the last few years, I've been going back trying to find this other stuff that I missed out on, and you could tell that in the music because that's what it sounds like, Like, same with, like, the Meatloaf stuff that we dug, Nick dug deep and found that kind of influence. We started embracing more of, like, the Weezer side of things, like Blue Album and Pinkerton, we love. And, Saves the Day records we love. And Get Up Kids, and, like, that whole, like, the 90s emo punk situation, like, that's when we really got into music, alongside all the, the fat records and the skate punk, if you want to call it that, music. And I think there's a lot more substance when you mix everything together rather than just sticking to one or the other,
Yeah.
That's how you make it. That's how you make your own sound.
I love when you guys let your Weezer influence just rip. Like Warming Up on Good For Me. What a song. Just like, that's straight off Pinkerton, and I love it. It's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, we're not really, like, it just got to the point where we have the conversation and be like, I know it's us playing it, but do you think people, they're going to, like, get shitty with us about it? And then we're just like, who cares? It's a cool song, and it's us doing it,
Well,
and that's, like,
go ahead.
Because that's naturally how we write now, because we were so influenced by that band.
Yeah. Well, you were at one time, I think one of the members of this would-be band is now totally preoccupied with, being a pop star. But you and Nick and Andrew from Fun were going to start a Weezer cover band, weren't you, at one point?
Yeah. And we had one practice, and, like, we were going to try and do all these cool charity shows and stuff. And I think that was before Fun signed to Fueled by Ramen, or a little bit after. Not entirely sure. But I remember we were one of the bands that were trying to, like, really get them on the label, too, because, like, I got super into them and saw them live, and I was, like, freaking out.
Yeah.
And then, and that's another songwriting thing where our band was going in the rock direction, and rock radio was dead. Well, to me, like, legitimate rock radio, whereas all this other stuff is, like, like radio rock, like, Tribal Tattoo kind of world guy, Like, that's not my scene at all.
The Dirt Fest scene.
What's up?
The Dirt Fest scene.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, good for them. They're making a lot of money and I'm not. But, that's just how it is. So, like, we went in the rock band direction while rock was dying, like Foo Fighters style rock and Jimmy Eat World rock, and then top 40 stuff started getting huge. And, like, obviously top 40 is whatever is in the top 40, but, like, it's like weird club pop with electronic drums and, like, like Katy Perry and, like, even new Taylor Swift and all this stuff.
Yeah.
Like, everything started having this cohesive sound again. And to me, it's like just early 90s stuff where, you listen to, like, Ace of Base and John Cicada and, like, all the stuff that, like, my parents used to be really into because it's just, like, easy listening.
Yeah.
And out of nowhere, that's the cool new hip pop stuff that is in the top 40. And then that kind of stuff just spawns, like, really pissed off music, which is also happening on the side. So you look at a band like La Dispute getting big, and they're writing really inaccessible stuff with really cool lyrics, and they're doing their own thing, and they're drawing a ton of people, and they're not following any formula. So, like, the underground is catching up to how big and crazy the actual, like, pop music stuff is right now. So with our band, that's another thing that just pissed us off more, where it's like we finally were in the exact position we wanted to be, and then everything changed again. So we were kind of just floating around,
Yeah. Let's dig into the new record a little bit. One of the songs that kind of got me right off the bat was the song "Designated Driver."
Yeah.
What do you remember about that one?
So, well, one weird thing is, like, I wrote a lot of really personal songs on the record, and like, the songs I did on this one, like, the two big ones for me were Designated Driver and Becoming Self-Aware. And Designated Driver was when I was in my single days, and I was, how everyone's like, there's, like, the good guys and the bad guys, and my whole life people were always like, you're a good guy, blah, 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 like, you're just so nice.
You are a good guy. You are a good guy.
I mean, but, like,
yeah, I know
I'm cool with it, but there's sometimes where you just get really pissed off at it, and you're like, what the fuck, man? This sucks. Like, no one takes me seriously, or at least in this, dating situation or whatever. So the lyrics are super literal. I was trying to, like, hang out with this girl that I was talking to when I was on tour, and and I was just disregarding everything of, like, what I really wanted in someone, and that whole record's kind of talking about, like, the weird struggle where I was trying to find out what kind of person I was. And, everything from, like, the songs to the actual album artwork is literally about that, where, you kind of bottle up everything, and then you realize who you are, and you stop giving a fuck about everything. So, with that song specifically, I was trying to hang out with this girl who I knew it wasn't going to work out and it didn't make sense and whatever. But I was like, I'm just supposed to do this. I'm just following what I'm supposed to do, yada, yada, yada. And my friend ends up just like leaving with her that same night.
Oh.
After I was like, I had to go save my friend who was wasted, trying to walk home in a blizzard, like a foot of snow blizzard in Michigan. So I was the only sober one in the whole house, which is always the situation. So I had to go drive away and find him, and I finally got back, and then the girl and my buddy ended up leaving together. So it was half of the situation where I was pissed off. Then the other half is like, I'm not pissed off. I'm glad that happened because I saw, like, it helped me establish that I am a good guy, and this is how the situation would normally go, because I'd rather be saving one of my friends than, like, compromising, someone's life for, some quick little thing. And, Nick added one line about, like, bring someone to your knees. It's like, I didn't do that. Like, that's not the type of person I am. But yeah, that song, it's pretty literal. And that becoming self-aware and should all have a little hint of, like, I was trying to struggle with the type of person I was and who I was looking for and all that kind of stuff. And, it's weird when you literally just feel like you're in limbo. You're like a weird in-betweener, and life is just really strange. So I was like, another good example is, like, I'm lactose intolerant, but once in a while I'll be like, you know what? Like, maybe if I have, like, a little ice cream, it'll be okay. Yeah. And then I feel like shit. That's the same situation with that song. That's just like the perfect metaphor for that, or the analogy of that, or whatever.
You know what's going to happen at the end, but you still do it anyway.
Yeah, and I got out all the things that I thought I should try, and they all were stupid. I was like, yeah, I don't want to do that anymore. And now, like, obviously it's a personal thing, but I ended up with a girl who is, like, weirdly perfect, and it's when I stopped trying and I stopped trying to do all this lame stuff, and I was like, I could be a good person and someone appreciates me for being who I am. And that's the hardest part to deal with, because I think everyone wants to adjust and adapt to what they think they should be rather than being comfortable with who they really are.
Yeah.
And it's so much easier to be yourself instead of be some other shitty person.
Well, you got some good songs out of it, so in the end, I think it all kind of worked out.
Yeah, and as sad as it sounds, every time a bad situation happens, the first thought is always, this sucks, but it's going to be a really good
song. What kind of lyric writer are you? Are you somebody who just kind of writes stream of consciousness? I don't know. Or do you write stream of consciousness, or are you very, like, meticulous with the way you write?
Yeah, it all depends, I guess. Like, with my brother, it's really weird because he just has, like, a bunch of stuff naturally flow out, and I think he's a phenomenal writer, but he can't directly explain what things are about,
Mm-hmm.
Because whether he wants to keep it to himself or whatever. But with me, like, I am very open about stuff, so with songs, I'll kind of dig deep, but it's very obvious stuff. So instead of, like, coding everything with metaphors, it's pretty straightforward,
Mm-hmm.
I just try and write it in a way that's accessible, because I think, the stuff I go through is a lot of people go through the same thing, So when I'm writing stuff, mostly it's out of anger or being bummed out or something like that. And it seems like that's the easiest way to have lyrics, or at least pump out lyrics for me, which kind of sucks, because I always, like, freaked out thinking I would try and set myself up in bad situations just so I could write better songs. But I'm like, now I know how to, like, pick and choose feelings and, I guess just shape the way I write.
Where do you want to push yourself as a writer? Like, what's an area that you maybe in working on this last record, that something that took you a while, like, I want to be better at that next time?
I mean, I think just storytelling through songs is the main thing I want to do. That's one thing that Nick's really good at. He can have, like, one super cohesive thing, whereas I feel like I have a lot of juvenile ways about going into lyrics, which, everyone's going to be a critic of themselves. Like, that's just how it is. But I always wish I could just have that, like, nice natural flow and, like, here's the beginning and here's the end, and all of it goes together perfectly, instead of here's choppy one-liners and then here's a chorus, because you can listen to a lot of bands and it'll be like really like substance-free lyrics, like, and I don't mean that in a straight edge way, I mean like literally no substance in the song, like I pulled the trigger and blah, 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 like just stuff that people would have on their live journals, you know what I mean? Like people will purposely write like these like catchy one-liners, and like to them that's what a hook is, but to me it's like if you get a whole feeling and you scoop someone up in that, like that's a hook to me. But when someone's just like, here's some really shitty like catchphrase thing that I want you to start using over and over again, and then a lot of bands they'll have like a journal and they write everything in it, and then they'll just like copy and paste parts out of that into a song, and it doesn't really mean anything, but it's like, oh, that's a cool quote, and that's how a lot of people are. So with me, I want to try and stay as far away from that as I can, and that's why like it's really cool when there's a lot of bands coming out, like what the Front Bottoms, they like, I'm not even like the biggest fan by any means, like I just like heard some of their stuff and I thought it was cool, and it's very like storytelling, like they just talk through stuff, and it's a whole cohesive thing,
Yeah.
Or like on the other side, like Taylor Swift, who I don't even know if she writes her songs. I'm assuming she doesn't. She
does. I think she at least has co-writes on all of them. So
okay, but like the way they like flow and everything, it's literally just a story.
Yeah,
and it's super impressive, So like that's the kind of thing I want to do, where it's like I want to write relatable stories, even if it's not relatable. That's another cool thing, because people they'll like feel how I feel for that moment. Like if a movie's really good, or you read a book, you kind of get entranced in that, and you actually start feeling the way that person feels. So that's why, like, I get that way with music. Like, I'll listen to a Not a Surf song, and I'll get bummed as hell if it's a sad song. Or I'll be super pumped up if it's, like, some awesome love song. And that's, I want to be that good to where I make someone feel how I feel every single song.
You just want to bum people out is what you're saying overall.
Yeah, I mean, I do that as is. Go to a Swellers show, you'll see.
Hey, listen, man, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for your time. Why don't you go ahead and plug where people can find you online, and more about Braided Veins, or the B-Sides comp that you have out, or all that stuff.
Okay, I guess I'll start with Swellers stuff. Pretty much anything Swellers, it's facebook.com/the Swellers, theswellers.com. The name is dumb enough where you can find it anywhere, because no one else is going to take it. So just the Swellers at everything. And we have a new B-Sides and Rarities compilation where 100% of the money goes straight to us. And the reason we're doing that, it's a $5 minimum donation. I believe it was 17 songs. And that's pretty much just helping us pay off a lot of bills and random debts. Like, we went to Brazil, paid out of pocket.
You got screwed.
After the tour, the promoter disappeared and owed us over $3,000. And then other bills started coming in that we were going to use that money to pay, so it just kept adding up and adding up and adding up. So because of people being amazing to us, we already paid off one of the major bills, which is really cool. And we're still, we still have several $1,000s we owe to people. So we're trying to do that, because we're not a big band, we're normal people. I work at Guitar Center in Michigan, I'm not living some crazy lavish lifestyle. And so, we're being open about that, and our label's cool with us doing it on our own. And it's songs from, when we first started all the way to, literally like the songwriting situation kind of comes in where there's a song called Parkview I wrote, and I do this terrible demo of me trying to type in the drums while I'm playing. And it's in I think it was in an apartment or something, but I tried like singing half volume, and it's pretty terrible, but we just showed, the process of the songwriting. So all that's on there, super cheap. You get a lot of songs out of it, and it directly benefits us. So that's the whole Swellers spiel. I'm in a band called Braided Veins, which is a new weird punk hardcore band, everything from like Refused to Black Flag to the Bronx kind of styles. And that's facebook.com/Braided Veins, Twitter, Braided Veins. It's all that stuff. We're playing a lot of shows around Michigan and trying to get out not probably going to tour, but we're trying to find a label so we could, still do cool stuff. And that's that band. And then me personally, just John O. Diener, JONODIENER. You can find me anywhere that way.
Beautiful. Thanks so much, man. I appreciate it. Good luck with everything, and hopefully I'll see you out there soon. It's been a while. I don't remember the last time I saw you guys play.
Yeah, I haven't seen you in a super long time. You also got to teach me how to do podcast stuff, because I'm trying to start my own.
I will. We'll do this. Soupy has a cool one, and there's a bunch of other cool ones out there. So I'll hit you up.
All right, cool, man.
Thanks, buddy. Well, that about wraps it up for this week's show. I would like to thank Jono for coming on, taking some time to talk about Swellers, Braided Veins, and make fun of Ghost Town. Always a good day when you can make fun of Ghost Town. If you would like to stay up to date with us, here are all the ways you can do so. Go to the website at www.voiceandversepodcast.com. You can find everything you need to know about Jonathan and all his projects there, as well as listen to all of our old episodes featuring Joel Madden from Good Charlotte, Brendan from Panic at the Disco, Never Shout Never, William Beckett, Taking Back Sunday, Gabe from Midtown, and many, many more. You can also visit us on Facebook at facebook.com/voiceandversepodcast or Twitter at voiceversepod. We're also on Stitcher. You can find the link to that on Stitcher.com, or you can go to the website, voiceandversepodcast.com, and get all the info there. Stay up to date with us. If you'd like what you hear, please subscribe on iTunes and leave us a nice review. 5 stars would be great. And then come back in 2 weeks for another episode of the Voice and Verse Podcast, when we uncover more of the stories behind your favorite songs. Thanks for listening, everybody, and we will see you soon.